Says
There's
recording.
we go. Okay, we're recording now. Hi, this is Wait, and this is a Seekers of Silence meeting recorded on May 1st, 2020. Uh, and I am the Zoom host for this meeting. And the only thing, I'll say a couple things real quick for people. As it proceeds, we're going to be listening to Father Terry Ryan. Please mute your microphones and please shut off your video. You shut off your video is it reduces the amount of bandwidth that we are using, and it makes it much less likely.
Well, that's not good.
No, David's frozen,
He's frozen.
and he's not even in Colorado.
Yeah, he's frozen, and we're recording his frozenness.
Yes.
I guess I may just start up here any minute now. We'll see. Maybe he did it himself. All right. Okay, I'm gonna start talking, right? You don't need to introduce me or anything, do you?
I can if I want to, because I have it all written down now.
Okay, go ahead. Why don't you
I'll
just
just
start?
say it.
David will catch up to us.
Absolutely. Our speaker this morning is Father Terry Ryan, Paulist priest, ordained on May 14th, 1977. He's a former pastor of St. John the 23rd University Parish in Knoxville, Tennessee, serving from 1995 to 2003. His passion for meditation and contemplation led him to becoming the spiritual founder of our Seekers of Silence group, who some are here today. Currently, Father Terry resides in a Trappist monastery in Snowmass, Colorado, where he continues to offer his reflections on the contemplative experience via Zoom. This morning, we will be listening to Father Terry's part 2 of Howard Thurman, who was an activist, an author, a theologian, a philosopher, and he did everything with an expanded consciousness, which is fascinating to us who enjoy mysticism. So we'll turn it over now to Father Terry. Good morning and welcome.
Good morning, everybody, and thank you for tuning in. We are going to record it, but we're not sure how you can find it, but not to worry about that. If you're in the contemplative life, why look at the future? Why worry? But as we move in here, I have a couple of things for down the road that you might think about, especially those who are attending the SOS First Saturdays. Is somewhere down the road, we're going to do something on a man called Rufus Jones. And you say to yourself, who is Rufus Jones? Well, that's my job, to introduce you to these people. Rufus Jones influenced Howard Thurman. Now we know both of them met Gandhi, and so they both had some influence towards and from Gandhi. And behind all that is Henry David Thoreau, which I'm talking about at a different time each month. So you're going to want that book somewhere down the road, probably in the August to November talks that I'm giving. A couple of things as we enter into this that I think are current with COVID and with what the SOS group does, which is introduce people to the contemplative life from various different traditions. And I'm reading a book currently called Hope in the Dark by Rebecca Solnit, Solnit. You can get it out of your library. But what she says, I think, especially applies to any group that is trying to open people up to ecumenical and interfaith spirituality and connections, because we're still so much stuck in the Reformation, in which some of the people in each religious group says, not only are we the best, we're the only one. And if you don't belong to us, you go to hell, or you're totally lost. It's us and nobody. And people like Howard Thurman are fighting against that. And his whole life, he felt that diversity is possible in unity. Not everybody should be the same. God says God made us diverse, so it must be good. So what you're doing, as Rebecca Solnit says, is you're doing your little work in your little corner of the world, Knoxville, Tennessee, in a group called Seekers of Silence, introducing people through various talks to various traditions. Rufus Jones, the book I just held up to you, was a Quaker and influenced Howard Thurman, who was sort of Baptist himself, and then he kind of became his Howard Thurmanness. So Hope says it's worth doing, no matter how many people know about it, because if someone does this and then another individual or group does some more of this and some more of this, eventually it builds and it can make a real difference. So I think keep that in mind. Just keep plugging away at what you do. The Paulist Fathers, one of our three things that we're about is ecumenical interfaith relations. And sometimes you feel awfully lonely doing it because you're surrounded by clergy who want everybody to become a Roman Catholic or else. So you feel sort of like an outlier, but it's worth doing because the church has said that it's worth doing. It's just that very few people actually do it. So keep that in mind. Now, another thing that I think is a part of Howard Thurman's way of life is something gnawed at him, kept after him to say, keep going at what you're doing, even though hardly anybody seems to be doing it. For one thing, he was, when he went to the seminary, which was up in Rochester, New York, he's from Daytona Beach, Florida, and his education was pretty much in the South. He was one of two Black students in the whole seminary. But it didn't make him say to himself, I must not be in the right place because hardly anybody here looks like me. He didn't let that get to him because he had this, even then, he had this connection with God, an interior connection that kept him at what he was doing, which is why I think the contemplative life is so very, very important to each one of us who can practice it, who call to it. I'm going to get to that in a moment, because it keeps you with that inner connection, especially in COVID times when you ask yourself, to whom am I connected? I mean, if you're a person of dark skin surrounded by people of light skin, you wonder, you can sometimes, what's my connection? Am I valuable? Am I important? And the interior prayer life says you're always important no matter what things look like on the outside or around you. But in terms of the contemplative, I'm not saying that it's for everybody. The Cloud of Unknowing, in its short book on privy counseling, well, Cloud of Unknowing is a book, but the guy who wrote the Cloud of Unknowing also wrote the book on privy counseling, a much shorter one. And he says, how do you know you're called to a contemplative life? And what happens is it stays with you. This sort of urge, this interest, this pull. For instance, I remember as a young man being turned on by reading a book on silence, solitude, interior life. Maybe even the word contemplation was used. Mostly it was meditation. And I'd read about it from somebody who was practicing what we now know as a more contemplative life of silence and solitude, if you will, or sort of forgetting the self for the moment. And I would be turned on by it, but I didn't practice it. Or I practiced it every now and again. I wasn't consistent about it, but there was something about it that never left me. So some people can read a book about something and it really interests them. They might read a novel about lawyers. I just got the latest John Grisham novel called Sully. and I'm a Grisham fan. So this one is not particularly about lawyers. As a matter of fact, it's about a basketball player from Africa. But you read a book about legal stuff and it turns you on. But do you then start applying to law schools? Do you then start studying the law? Well, if you don't, you're probably not interested in being a lawyer. You just kind of get interested in stuff. I get interested in all kinds of things, but I'm not turned on to follow them. But the contemplative books I read, and they were interesting. And then I wanted to do it. And when I did it, as inconsistent as I did, I was sort of pulled in that direction. I says, then I'd come back to it again and again. So that's how you kind of know that this is for you, as opposed to someone who practices it for a little while because it looks good, and then they get bored and they leave, and they never think about it again. So in that sense, they're probably not called. I think of myself in the monastery after it's almost a year, May 14th, the feast of my ordination. For those of you who are looking for ordination cards, May 14th, 44 years. And I'm still at it. So I think maybe I was called, although some people wish I wasn't. The monastery, after almost a year, still is attractive. There are guys who come here for a few weeks, a few months, and it's the initial thing. If they read about it, it sounds awfully good. And they come, but the actual life, it's not awfully good to them. It's boring. Well, it can be boring, but I still have the urge to stay, to be here, to participate in it. If you don't have that, you just leave, which is probably a good thing. So Howard Thurman was this kind of fellow who this urge for a church that was for everybody kept after him, especially when he found himself always in a world where whatever church he went into, everybody was kind of the same. It was, he could go into a church that was filled with people who looked just like him. And he says, well, why aren't there any white people here? And he go into a white church, why aren't there any black people here? And so on and so forth. This is, I think, what you end up with. And so he's trying to look for something that is more universal, something that really grabs everybody. And if he can find that, whoops, there I am. There I am with a nice background. I think that's a San Francisco Bay behind me. He founds his own church in San Francisco because he can't find one like it. And he says it's for everybody. And a lot of people came to it because they're looking for something that's inclusive, not something that says it's for a lot of people, but not for certain people. We keep all these things in mind. And one of the things that he said was that you have to keep in mind that you are valuable to God. This, I think, is something you get with the interior prayer, one-on-one, the sense of a presence. And that presence is intimate or likes being with you. You maybe sometimes use the word love. It's attractive and attracting. So you have value. This is what I think you want to know. You have value because around you, people might only value because of how you benefit them materially. Black people were wanted in this country when they could be slaves to make money for the whites. But once they couldn't make them slaves, they had no use for them. So you're valuable regardless of your economic value to others. And he says, therefore, it's very important to accept, to grab onto the value that you have as a human being that I think we get in the interior prayer when we sense that God really likes us as God made us, not as society wants you to be. So one of the things Howard Thurman says is Don't be legion. Legion was in the Bible was there lots of devils. He said, don't wear a lot of masks just to please other people because you're going to forget who you are. Uh, says, don't be who you're not. Be who you actually are. So I think these are some things to just keep in mind as we continue with Howard Thurman. Um, and I think that in terms of the prayer itself, he was attracted to this kind of interior life. It's what kept him going when others weren't on board with him. That's why he was a unique figure in the 20th century. He says, whatever you use to help you to quiet down is what readies you for this experience of what we call union or non-duality, or a sense of being part of this power, this force, this ultimate reality, as Thomas Keating and others have called it. So some people do something called Lectio. They read a little bit of scripture, or maybe they'll read some spiritual book, but just a little, because they're just trying to quiet themselves down. As soon as they feel quiet, you put the book aside. Some people do yoga. So you don't say, first I'll do an hour of yoga and then I'll meditate. Well, okay. My suggestion is just do yoga until you quiet down, until you sort of ready yourself. We do this in choir. We chant psalms and such a couple of times a day here at the monastery. It's actually the making the sounds, which sometimes is like noise. We make the sounds, the chanting. It's a kind of a plain chant. It's meant to kind of still you so that the other parts of the day you can be more open to the presence of God and not the craziness going on in your mind. And the thought is that God initiates this encounter. So you're just trying to ready yourself. You don't make the encounter happen. You ready yourself for it to happen. It's so much different than a lot of other things that you accomplish. You say, if I do it, then it's done. Here you simply ready yourself for the doer. The great doer is God. And if you call to this kind of prayer, it good things will happen. Although, well, they didn't happen for Teresa of Calcutta. She was bored most of the time. But notice she did good work. So there was something going on. So God initiates this encounter. And some people say, I can't get still. I can't get still. It's a practice art. Don't assume that stillness comes naturally, which is why people often have to do things to ready themselves. Now, living in a monastery, stillness, I would suspect, comes a little bit more readily, but not always. Not always. There are times when it's just as difficult because we're still part of the human condition. But we try with more silence and a little bit more solitude to be kind of more ready on an ongoing basis for when the invitation seems to come. God says, why don't you just get still, Terry, for a moment? But it's a practice art for many of us, especially in our busy life. Now, of course, that people have said, my life's not busy at all. It's COVID. I wish you were busy. Well, you use all this COVID not busyness to make yourself more available to the prayer? Or did you just whine and complain or live in fear? It's a question you can ask yourself, a question I have to ask myself. So it's a practiced art. So when you say, I cannot sit still, well, I can't run a marathon. Well, I could not now, ever, but there were times when I said I can't run a marathon, but I could run a marathon if I did the work. Well, this is not quite the amount of work for this, but you have to practice being still and find ways to get more still, if you will. So it's work. And one of the things there's a fear about this work for some people. They fear being quiet. I've heard a lot of students in school say they have to have their earbuds in with music because they can't stand the silence. They've grown up without any silence, and they feel uncomfortable on the silence. I feel uncomfortable with noise. They feel uncomfortable with just rest. Why? Because they're stuck with themselves. And they, I mean, why would you want to be just with God if you can't even stand being with you? Because a lot of times that's what it feels like. I'm just by myself. You're not. And God will eventually let you know you're not. But if you don't even like being with yourself, you certainly can't open yourself up to being with God. So, what a lot of people do, since they fear quiet or stillness or rest, they go into detours, and the detours are preoccupations. All our preoccupations, not our occupations. And this is all Howard Thurman is saying this kind of stuff. So he's saying we go into detours. We preoccupy ourselves with what? Fears, anxieties, concerns, uh, more and more of something, maybe too much exercise, too much internet, too many other things to keep us busy so that we don't have to just be with ourselves. You could be alone, but you're churning over anxieties and worries, thinking about the future, living in resentments of the past, and so on. So his suggestion is, why don't you just wait in the present moment? Well, that's pretty scary to a lot of people. Uh, but so what's the attitude to have in the present moment? Hope. And that's one of the things I started out with this morning. Hope, as Solnit was saying. A little bit of hope can go a long way, but you got to have a little to start. Like getting fit, you just start. I mean, jogging, I start back jogging. I just do a little, not a lot, but a little gets you started. So you wait in the presence with a silent hope. So you have to have a hope. Otherwise, why bother? So a silent hope that something will transpire within. This is how what Howard Thurman said. Something. Don't even name it. Don't even call it. Right? This something will happen inside of me. And what will that happening be? This is how you know you're getting the call to interior prayer. That's valuable. That something will relax the hold we have on things that do not make for our peace. I'll say that again. That's a quote from him. Our hope when we try to live in the present moment is that something will transpire within that relaxes the hold, releases that hold that we have on things that don't bring us any peace. Why live in fear? It doesn't bring any peace. Anxiety, concern. Why live in the future if it doesn't bring any peace? Trust in God, it's said. So, well, you can say, oh, trust in God, but you can say that, but out of the blue, you're not going to trust in God. But with little by little, this kind of waiting in the present, doing a prep work, as I've said, for so you can ready yourself for this experience, practicing stillness, and those kinds of things. They'll all help us to let go of things that are really getting in our way. And he has this wonderful image. He says, what this will be for the world, he's always saying, what I do within will have an effect in the world. He says, become a lung through which the Holy Spirit can breathe, or the Spirit. He goes, become a lung through which the Spirit can breathe into the world. In other words, this God who loves us so intimately, in the present moment and in every moment, is a God who wants to breathe this love through us to the world. And I think this is what Howard Thurman was trying to do in his own ministry. And I'm sure sometimes he felt like he was an outlier. And am I crazy? I mean, I'm doing this different stuff. All the things he did in his life, the schooling that he got, and so on and so forth, it was always an uphill battle. What you can do with this, another thing that will come to it, is you can become a private person. I think when you're sitting in silence and stillness and you're not paying attention to a lot of your thoughts, or you're focused on just one thing. I don't know, the presence of God, maybe a tree or something that helps you to get a sense of this power. He calls it private. You're with you. He calls it private, but you don't become self-centered. The contemplative is not a self-centered person. So by stepping away from togetherness, he says that togetherness can become an idol. And I hear so many people saying, "Oh, I can't wait to get together with people." Well, be careful. Don't worship it. I can understand that, getting together with people. But remember to get together with yourself. Hopefully, we've been practicing that in this stay-at-homeness that we've been living. So you want to continue to have the solitude. Uh, Henry David Thoreau, for instance, he chose solitude. He wasn't isolated. He was alone, but he wasn't self-centered. He would write about his experiences. And here's a man with great hope because he feels somewhat singular. Walter Emerson might have been doing some of it, these couple of transcendental people, if you will, what they call themselves. But he was living alone um, out in the woods. He wasn't living in a community or anything like that. And but he felt it was valuable for him and maybe valuable for others, even though he wasn't running into many others. So he would write, and eventually, what he was writing about took hold. Walden Pond, for instance, or Walden. So what you want is if you're not self-centered, then you will always have a togetherness thing about you. And you will think about ways to be together, even if you can't be face to face with people. FaceTime, writing letters, calls, texting, emails, and so on and so forth. Two of my sisters used to write to one another a lot. Well, they used to because one of them died. But it's that kind of thing. It's a way, you find your way to connect with people that helps you to have your solitude, your so-called alone time with yourself and this inner presence who's always here within us, and ways to become connected with others. Um, and just because you live with somebody, that is, you in the same house with them, doesn't mean that you have togetherness. I mean, I've lived in rectories and everybody's going every which way doing their work, and it's not too much togetherness in the whole thing. Now, he takes the kingdom of God. Jesus spoke about the kingdom of God, and maybe he got this from. I think he got this from Rufus Jones, if he didn't get it from his own life. Rufus Jones, the Quaker guy who will study down the road. The Quakers felt that the kingdom of God was not just about sitting silently, opening yourself to the light, which is what people see Quakers doing when they're sitting in their, all sitting together in their chairs in their congregations or communal gatherings. But they say, no, you have to have an active life. And that active life needs to be for social justice. And so when Jesus, this is how Howard Thurman saw Jesus' kingdom of God. It's not about you getting to heaven after you die, and it's not about you getting all you can in this world. This is not Calvinism. The kingdom of God is a release. It's a release. If the kingdom of God is where it releases people held in economic, social, and political bondage. And he certainly felt that in the Black community. You could look at it nowadays, the word would be racism, neoliberal capitalism, economic greed. Remember the movie? There was a movie where greed is good was in the movie. Maybe it's Wall Street. Greed is good. Well, greed's not good. But there are people who think greed is good and they feel just comfortable going to church or receiving communion. Greed is good. Get all I can for me. They believe in what's called the invisible hand. That if I just work hard, do as best as I can, accumulate what I can, somehow everybody else will benefit. Well, that is not happening. So I think Gandhi saw it too with the British in India. Uh, and but he goes on. Yeah, I think he's got a very interesting point here next. He says the meaning of life is not all about happiness, joy, or satisfaction with all the stuff you accumulate. He says it isn't. He didn't see it in his own life, nor with a lot of other people, but he said, so, well, we're supposed to relieve the economic imbalances, he said, at the same time, so that the kingdom of God is not all about politics and economics. He says, it's not about you being happy or joyful or even having complete satisfaction, whatever that is. He said, because that's not real life either. That's not really going to happen because there's a lot of people have a lot of stuff and they're miserable. He says, life just may say no to some of our cherished desires. Now, here's something to consider. And how many people I've met and you've met that have said, oh, I don't believe in that God stuff anymore. I don't believe in church or religion. I asked God to do stuff for me and I didn't get nothing. So and so died. So and so got sick and didn't get better. Or this happened to me. I lost my job. And where's God in all this? So he says, life is life. In other words, one of the things I think comes out of contemplative prayer is not that you get what you want, but that you adjust to what you get in many ways. So there's a sense in which we work for things. It's not as if we sit around and say, oh God, I'm not going to do anything. You just, take care of things economically, socially, politically. It's your job, not mine. It's that you can work for things, but not with the sense of you're in charge of the results. Okay. You're only in charge of the effort, not the results. And there's some things you just let go of. So he says, life just may say no. And he says, you know what? We use the word suck it up now. He says, learn to live with life's no. This pandemic is life's no. It's a big no to all of us to get the way things used to be. And there may be a reason for it. And I think it'll take us a little while to unpackage what those reasons are. And I'm not a big guru that I'm going to jump into it. But he says, you think God's not at work. God may be at work. God may be closer to you when you think God is farther away. There may be things to learn from all this. We're still trying to figure out where COVID came from. What started all this stuff? We think we know, but then some people say we don't have all the information. But to say that God took a powder or left us in the lurch with all this terrible things is not necessarily so. Now, he's not talking about COVID. I'm trying to translate it. But he's just saying, a lot of times you don't get stuff. And just learn to live with the no. Life has no's to it. So he didn't get a lot of stuff in his life, all that much. I mean, he was a black man. But one thing he recognized is Jesus resisted the low bar of established power. In other words, established power has a pretty low bar for care and concern for the little guy. And Jesus resisted that. A lot of what he talked about was about the little guy. And you know what? Powers didn't like that, so they got rid of him. Those who are in power don't care to hear about people talking about you had too much power. You don't care enough about thus and so. They don't like that, so they got rid of him. And but the thief on the cross, who said, "Remember me when you get to paradise," he also resisted the established powers. So yeah, but he was a thief. Well, if you remember Les Mis, the novel Les Mis, which is very long, by the way, but well worth it, and the play, Jean Valjean was thrown in prison because he stole a loaf of bread. So he resisted established power. Power has, and it doesn't want to let go. And Jean Valjean took a loaf of bread because his family was starving. he got caught and he got thrown in prison. So Jesus is looking at this and he says, those with all the power, they they lack concern. And this is what Howard Thurman was trying to do. Not only did he want to start a church that was inclusive, but he wanted to have a faith that had an interior life, which a lot of religious groups don't have much interior life. They think they do, but they wouldn't know contemplation from a hole in the wall. And he also wanted them from that interior life and from that gathering together to enter into the sufferings of the world. He said, this is the kingdom of God. And he feels that Jesus was right there with him. So church, what he has found of church as he's going along is it tends to be divisive and discriminating as an institution. It's sectarian. And I think of my own the church as, Jesus didn't found the Roman Catholic Church. And I think, are we Catholics? Am I a Catholic first and then a Christian second? In other words, Catholic with all that says, but I'm divisive. This is what happened in the Reformation. Different religious denominations started killing one another because you aren't just like me. And they even had places in Carol Houseland is a famous story. As she was poor, she came into a church one day, and the only seat was with the rich people section. They had sections. The poor people sat one place, the rich people another, and they took her out of the rich section. They threw her into the poor section, where there was hardly any room. I remember in my town in Westchester County when I was a teenager, a local movie theater in this town had a section where most of the Black people were kind of expected to sit. It was also the smoking section. It had a smoking section in the theaters. And it's the way it was. And Thurman is saying no. So what he feels is each religious experience, each experience is not so much different and better than or best. He says they're all authentic, identically authentic if it's a true religious experience, which is a sense of oneness with, a sense of non-duality, or at least less duality if you're moving along. He says, regardless of the path that you're on, there's so many different paths that can have this deep religious experience. Gandhi, for instance. Thomas Keating calls it the experience of ultimate reality, in which there are no differences. And Thurman said, religions, they don't have to be the same. They don't all have to be one. Diversity is not a bad thing. There can be unity in diversity. And that's what he was trying to do with his church in San Francisco that he founded was, he says, we're one. We look different. We have lots of diversities, but there's an underlying unity that's really only going to come from a deep interior life. It really is, because there's so much in culture, in the culture, that impinges upon religion. We think religion should affect culture, but in fact, culture is impinging upon religion. People say, I want to live in a safe place. Often what they mean is, I want to live in a place where everybody looks like me, and I feel comfortable with that. I don't want to live someplace where the people look different than me, or are economically different than me, or the skin color is different than me, or their language is different from me. I don't want to live there. And I don't want to worship there. I want to go someplace where I feel comfortable, basically is it. And if you're living a rather shallow life in that religious sense, in that cultural sense, you're always going to look for the sameness. And yet, if you look around our planet, Gaia, our Earth, of which we're all Earthlings. That's what connects us. Thomas Berry says we're all Earthlings. No matter color of your skin or your language, we're all Earthlings. And if nature breaks down, it's going to affect everybody equally, or as it says in the scripture, the rain falls on everybody, or it doesn't fall on anybody. And right now we're having a lot of drought around here, and Knoxville, I don't think has drought. They get lots of rain, but we got drought here in the mountain area. California has drought. So much drought. Well, it's drought for everybody, not drought for some people. The good people don't get drought. The bad people do. No, it's for everybody. So he feels that religions can be the same, but they don't all have to be sameness. There's this underlying same, the contemplative, for instance. And what dogmas do, they basically separate us. If fear rules, dogma separates. Dogma can sort of say, this is a way to explain what I believe, is a lot different than saying what I believe is right. And if you don't believe what I believe, the heck with you. This is a fear about certainty. There's a great need for certainty. And various 20th century mystics in the Western traditions of religion have said this. There's a great need for certainty among certain people because they have a fear about differences. And they sometimes use the word relativity. You think, oh, my way's okay, your way's okay. When in fact, both of our ways are light. I don't mean the light of God, but lightweight. Neither of us have much way at all. We're mediocrity. Yeah, your mediocrity is as good as my mediocrity. People don't like that. I want my mediocrity to be right, your mediocrity to be wrong. But once you get into a deeper prayer life, really get seriously transformed, you are open to what you can learn from other traditions. And you're open to their paths having some value, but you don't have to follow their path. We can't follow 10 paths. So we have to find our unique path, and hopefully a tradition helps us to do this. So don't be who you're not, is what Thurman would say. I think that Matthew 12, chapter 12, verse 50, if you want to write it down and look it up, he says, whoever, I didn't say this, Jesus did, or at least it says it in Matthew, he said it, whoever shall do the will of my Father, the same is my brother, sister, and mother. Well, I don't think the will of the Father said, be a good Jew. I think that was good for a Jew to be a good Jew. But the will of the Father was what Jesus was talking about, I think, on the Sermon on the Mount, or the Sermon on the Mount, as it would be in Matthew's Gospel. So read it and see it. Or the end of Matthew's Gospel says, you fed the hungry, you clothed the naked, you housed the homeless, you visit the imprisoned and the sick. He says, that's who's following me. So evangelization, then, this, which people often use as a word to get everybody to be just like me, he says what he thinks evangelization is, and I think the Paulist fathers are like this, and I think SOS, Spirit of Seekers of Silence, is to make a highway for the Lord. Make a highway for the Lord that other people can get on, a highway for the Lord, and not to make someone a member of your group. So much evangelization is about membership. What church do you belong to? If you're in the South, that's one of the first questions they ask you. What church do you belong to? The assumption is you belong to one of them. And if you don't, why don't you come to our church? Join our group. We all look the same and all think the same. And maybe you can think like us and look, because you look like us. So he says, make a highway for the Lord. I think we do that when we talk about the contemplative life. I think we're opening up a road for us and the Lord to be on, walking together, or at least the Lord coming to us, rather than try to make someone a member. Membership is spiritual lightweight, if you will. So he feels that community so often when it's all about dogma or how we look or what we think, uh, as opposed to a deeper interior life. He says, community is too often a bonding of homogenized lookalikes. And he says, that's racism. And it tamps down the love ethic of Jesus. The love ethic of Jesus was always sort of climbing over walls, climbing over barriers, connecting with. And if you just read, the people who come to him, they come from different traditions, and he meets them where they are. He says, go, your faith has saved you. He never says, now, will you please start going to the synagogue or something like that? Go, your faith has saved you. Or come follow me. So we have to remember, as Howard Thurman says, we came from unity. So we have in our genes a non-duality that was in the creation story of Adam and Eve. And then original sin was all about separateness. And so what we want to do is get over the separateness and get back into our original unity, our original blessing. Read Matthew Fox, for instance. You know, he just put out a new book on Julian of Norwich. Do I have that book here? Let me look. Yes, I do. Let me hold it up for you. This is another good one. No, that's a different one. I mean, that's also good. But let me get this book for you. I'll hold it up. When you have virtual backgrounds, you can't see it. Anyhow, Julian of, whoops, you can't see it. Okay, I'll read it. Julian of Norwich by Matthew Fox. And forward by Mirabai Starr. I think Fox just wrote this thing in 2020. And I think it's really good because it's Julie of Norwich, and he talks about her in terms of COVID. She was an anchoress in a plague. So, you know, she lived, but she was very optimistic. In any case, we won't go there too much. So he says, community is not about all being alike. Stop wearing a mask to make you look like everybody else. He says, this is a death, the death to our true self. What he wanted is to have harmony that transcends diversity. The interior harmony, being one with the presence within, is to sort of be in a comfort zone of with oneself. And that will help you to transcend the diversity that you see around you. Your eyes see differences, but you transcend that. So it's not that you don't see differences. Differences are fine. We learn from differences, but we transcend differences as being the enemy or wrong. So diversity, on the other hand, finds its richness in a transcendent harmony. So I know I'm not the same as you, but because we both have an interior life, there's a harmony that transcends our diversity. So we're able to live with differences. And it took me a long time to do that. Yeah, even in a monastery. Yeah, I'm in a monastery. So, well, you guys are all like, no, we're not. I'm not like these guys. And they're not like me. And when you think about it, I was just reading this someplace, can't remember right now. The difference is I'm not the same as a lot of other priests. And a lot of priests will tell you that. They think I'm a heretic. But what I found is, and on the other hand, I used to criticize priests for not being more like me. Well, I got over that. The thing is, we need the differences in priests because I know some priests who I used to think are off the wall, but they can reach certain people that I could never reach. And it used to bother me that I couldn't reach some people. Now I just realize God made me to reach certain people. And other people, it's just not going to happen. They're just not interested. And it's not that I'm wrong or I got to change or I have to wear a mask so they'll like me. It's not a matter of liking me. They just don't get anything from what I'm talking about. I'm all weird. But some people do. So it's good to have different priests because there's so many differences, even in a singular congregation, even though on the outside they look alike. Economically, skin color, language, there's still interior differences. So that's the way it is. He finds that hatred and hatred is the foundation upon which can establish a dreadful emotional security. Let me unpack that. Sometimes we just going to hate other people because it makes us feel secure in our group. And I think you find that in religion. You actually, for quite a while, I don't think it's as much now in the South. It used to be kind of Roman Catholics really put down in the South. But because a lot of Yankee Catholics moved to the South and Mid-South for retirement purposes, because it's a lot cheaper, the weather's a little bit better. Although they got a lot of black ice in Knoxville, I'll tell you that. So all these Catholic Yankees moved to the Mid-South and the South. So it's not so bad anymore. But we're still pretty small in terms of the total population. But I think we're a little bit more accepted. But it used to not be so. But people, he says, sometimes people have to hate other groups and other people because it makes them feel emotionally secure. I feel better about myself if I can really put you down. Well, I read a book on the death of democracy, a recent book, Death of Democracy. It's about what happened in pre-World War II Germany, after World War I up to the mid-30s, let's say 1930s, that there could be a lot of hate, not just for Jews, for communists, or communists against socialists, or socialists against capitalists, so on and so forth. Everybody looking for some sense of security in a world that just seemed like it was falling apart. And so we don't want to get caught up in a hatred for others. Just recognize that they're different, but we don't have to hate them. And if you do hate, so what's that about? Well, I think if you have an interior prayer life, God will shine the light on you and show you what it is. And a lot of times this hate or dislike or put down of others, it kind of validates a damaged self because we feel we're being ignored. So he's saying this now. Howard Thurman is saying this to people of his color. He says, because you're ignored. He says, yeah, you're ignored, but that's no reason to hate the white person. What it does is it wills that the other person be non-existent. And he says, on the other hand, the white can hate the black and wish that they were non-existent. It validates myself of being a better person than you. He says, basically, segregation guarantees inhumanness. We try to make people inhuman by the segregation. And we tend to just hate people who hate us. He brings up the instance of Native Americans or Indian nations or indigenous people, so on. He brings this up. Here's a group. He says, there was a tendency to reject those who rejected them. You white people don't like us. We don't like you either. But there's another person that I'm going to do down the road, whether I do it for SOS or not. Probably I'll do it for out here or for whatever group. It's Nicholas Black Elk. Nicholas Black Elk was Lakota, and he converted to Catholicism. Now, one of the issues with one of the things that seems to bring out in the book is Nicholas. Well, he wasn't called Nicholas until he became a Catholic. Then because he became a Catholic on December 6th, the feast of St. Nicholas. But Black Elk says, we got to get along. We got to get along. So just because people don't like you not liking them isn't going to help to get along. Somebody's got to make a break. And Howard Thurman, he was very much for nonviolence, as was Gandhi, as was Rufus Jones and the Quakers. And he said nonviolence is not so much to change a situation as to change a person. It's to make the other person look at themselves from a different angle in what they're doing. And it may not immediately change the situation, but it may awaken the conscience of that person to the evils of the system that they are defending. So a lot of people say, I practice nonviolence, nothing changed. Maybe you change. Again, hope. Nonviolence is about hope. And Howard Thurman influenced Martin Luther King. It's hope. You do it. No matter how small you think what you're doing is you do it. And maybe it catches on with other people. If there's hope here, hope there, this action, this small action, it will build and maybe make a change. So as I'm running down out of time here, to ask, especially in these COVID times, who am I? Remember, Howard said, don't wear masks. Who are you? Who has God made you? And part of that is, to whom do I belong? And this was a big issue with COVID. I don't feel I belong to people like I did in the past because I'm not with them. Well, one of the things that I think the contemplative life does is it helps us to sense a belonging with this power, this presence, this ultimate reality, this love that is within us. And that kind of belonging can sustain us very much. To whom do I belong in this area when we're distancing ourselves from one another? And one of the ways he said to feel a sense of belonging is, why don't you participate in something? To participate. So in a way that you feel you count, and that will give you a dignity, a self-respect. I think this is, so volunteerism is one way if you're in a congregation, but the attraction of team sports, I might end with this for now, before we take a break, team sports, in which the coach takes a kid from the ghetto where he felt he didn't belong, he wasn't part of anything, nobody cared. But in team sports, he found that people were relying upon him, and that that's the attraction of team sport. You participate in something greater than yourself, where other people rely on you to get something done. And that gives you a dignity and a sense of self-respect. You work hard, you do it as best as you can. So a lot of people of color growing up, they're fortunate to find team sports and a talent that they have that's within them that can be developed. So we all have a spiritual talent, if you will. It needs development. And when it is developed, it helps it to feel a sense of worth. And when you get in touch with that interior presence, you know you're not ignored. When other people ignore you, you know you're not ignored. Sometimes people pass you over. They treat you as faceless, as if you don't exist. I've had that experience. But when you have that interior connection, you know you exist. You're loved. You have purpose, and then you find out what that purpose is. So I think being a volunteer is somehow to be accountable to someone. And you who participate in SOS feel in a sense of being accountable to each other. Otherwise, this organization dies. All right, I'm going to stop with that. I think we've gone maybe 50 minutes or so. So we're going to take a break. David, is that right? Are you in touch with
Yes.
us?
Yeah.
Okay.
As a matter of fact, up. So let's go ahead and take a break. It helps things be more stable. I'm gonna stop. I'll stop recording here. We'll take a break for like how about quarter after, Father? That'd be okay. I can't hear you. You're mute.
Yeah, that's about 12 minutes from now. And let people know how they can keep me from debtor's prison, where they'll have to visit
Oh,
me.
That's right. That's right. I will put that up while we're on break, as a matter of fact, so I won't stop. Put that up so other people can see it too.
Thank you. I'm going mute now.
Okay. All right. See you quarter after. I think somebody just joined us. If you just joined us, I'm afraid you're a little late. The room opened a couple hours ago, and Father Terry started talking an hour ago. And, uh, there we go. I'm about to put up there. Oh, we're on. Whoop. Wrong one. Try it again. There. Popped up the wrong slide there. Yeah, we're on break right now, but Father Terry will be back, and then we're sharing how you can make donations to Father Terry Ryan and support him in his ministry. There's two ways to do that. One is through Venmo. If you've never used Venmo before, it was extremely easy to use. It's an app. You can download it. I use it to support different charitable groups, as a matter of fact, and I've gotten to really like it. I use it, as a matter of fact, on a weekly basis now. But anyway, just look, just Google, for VENMO, or look in whatever, however you shop for apps. And if you get Venmo, then his address on Venmo is Terry, Terry dash Ryan, Ryan dash 25. And it's a really easy way to make a donation to Father Ryan's ministry. Or you can just send him a check to Father Terry Ryan at St. Benedict's Monastery, 1012 Monastery Road, Snowmass, Colorado, 81654. And we'll get going again here in just a minute. I see somebody video on. Whoops, if I can. I'm having cursor problems today. I'll bet you anything the battery's died on my cursor. Okay, who are you? I see somebody does. Looks like they get their video on. You'll excuse me. I'm stopping your video because we don't want videos on while we're doing this because too many people have their, and the system just might crash. Because we use up too much bandwidth. Although I am going to ask our friend Mary. Mary, are you there?
Yeah, David, I'm here.
Oh, okay. You're going to be available to time Century in Prayer for us?
Yes, I can.
Okay. That's excellent. We'll tell Father when he gets back.
So we're going to contemplate?
I think so. Let's see if I can type in the Seekers of Silence. I want to see if they have his stuff.
We're stable today, I've noticed. I don't know what's going on. Got people falling out and coming back. Did we lose the share screen?
I think so.
Oh dear. There.
David,
Yes.
it's 12:15 and Father Terry is back.
Oh, I've got the slide up, Father. So if you don't talk, I don't see you. Okay, I see you now. Father
I'm
Terry.
talking. Yes, I'm
Oh,
here.
okay. Okay. I'll turn it back over to you, Father. I'll take the slide down now, okay? It's been up for 10 minutes. Have addressed people and talked a little bit about it, okay?
That's fine. Yes. Okay. Uh, Back to me. All right. Well, now, according to the way we usually do things here, we're going to do, and Mary Kendall is with us. She's our official timer. We are going to do 20 minutes of practicing silence and stillness, whatever your contemplative practice is. And I don't think you have to record our 20 minutes of silence, David.
Okay.
So you can turn that off. In any case, Mary, you ready?
Yep.
Okay, go. And if somebody says, I can't sit for 20 minutes, then we're to practice up. So sit for 5 and then get up and move around and then try another 3. I mean, little by little. Okay, take it over, Mary. Okay. We're back. All right. Now, at this point, Oh, excuse me. All right, we're back. At this point, we do Q&A. And after we finish Q&A, if we have any time, I'll finish off with a couple of things. You can do Q&A by putting it into the chat, and hopefully David will see it. Or you can unmute yourself and ask a question. Or if you have something called reactions, you can wave your hand, hit that, wave hand, then it goes into your screen, and then hopefully he'll see that. But let's try either put it in chat or unmute yourself and just ask a question.
Sounds good to me. And I see a question now.
Okay.
What
Let's
is the
see.
title?
What is the title of the Rufus Jones book?
Yeah.
You are going to look at Orbis Press. Actually, you can get it on Amazon, but Orbis Press has this. It's called Rufus Jones, Essential Writings. He wrote a lot of books, but I would start out with this one, Essential Writings. It's published by Orbis Press. The book is $18. It's not very thick. I think it's about 100. It's 160 pages to be exact. So that's the name of that. Can you explain a little more or expand on spiritual talents? If I get this right, it's what I might have been mentioning earlier in the talk is, for instance, and Rufus Jones speaks about this, the contemplative life doesn't have to be what's called apophatic, which is where you sit and you let go. You let go of focus on thoughts, and you stop talking, and you just sit. And so you're not trying to think about yourself. You're not trying to think about your plans. You're not trying to think about anything. So that thoughts become kind of background. That's one way to do it. And if you have a talent for that, it will reveal itself because, first of all, you read about that and it will attract you. If you read about it, it doesn't attract you, then that's not the way to go. But it will attract you. And then when you practice it, even if you feel no particular success early on, or you feel some sense of quiet and stillness in the presence of God, then you get bored and distracted. But you keeps gnawing away at you to go back and try it again, do it again, keep doing it. You miss it, then that's probably a call. On the other hand, there's another way to do it, which is the cataphatic method, it's called. And that's where you would have a sense of the presence through maybe a focus on one particular thing, one particular situation. I will take Henry David Thoreau, who I'll be talking about in 2 weeks from now on the third Saturday of the month at 9 a.m. He would take a meandering walk. That is, his walk wasn't for the purpose of raising his heartbeat and getting exercise so he can live forever. But it was so that he could see with kind of an, you might call it the inner eye, he could see something in a tree that was more than just the tree. First of all, he'd see the tree and he would focus maybe on that tree. It would attract him. It would grab his attention. I'm saying tree for an example, could be a flower. The tree grabs his attention because he's not in a hurry. And so he stops and he just lets the tree reveal itself, whatever was grabbing his attention. He says, you can see the face of God in the tree. And so you feel a connection with nature, and through nature, a connection with the creator of that nature. You could do it walking along a shore of an ocean. You might see something in the sand. There might be something about the water. It might be the whole ocean itself, since God is the creator of everything and reveals God's self in God's creation. It could be in another person or in a group of people. So, for instance, and you do that, and when you're not doing it, you miss it. You're attracted to go back to it. So he would take this walk every day from noon to 4 p.m. Just take a walk in the woods. He lived in the woods. So that would be another way of discovering a spiritual talent. I will take another example. You discover the presence of God in serving other people. You don't serve them frantically. You don't serve them with being upset because the results aren't what you planned. You just find a call to be of service in a particular way, and you keep reviewing that. You keep being drawn to that call. So you might do something for a while, and then you stop it, but you feel called to do it some more. You miss it. And so that's what brings you back to doing it. It could be something because in doing it, you sense the presence of God in relationship to the other person whom you are serving. So that would be a way, I suppose it could happen in, well, technically in Roman Catholicism, marriage is a sacrament. Well, it's more than technically. And you're supposed to be able to grow in holiness through your spouse. So, in fact, in your relationship, you might find a spiritual talent of growing closer to God through the way you are with this other person who occasionally drives you crazy. It could be, I will say here in the monastery, I would say to myself, for instance, if I said, oh, I love being in the monastery because I have silence and stillness, but I hate these monks, they drive me crazy. Well, then I would say you don't have a spiritual talent to live in community. Maybe you need to live in a hermitage. But I find living with these men, the spiritual talent is I grow selfless, a little bit more selfless, a little bit let going of results of things that we do together. And so I have a spiritual talent for living with these men, living in community with these men, not just living in a building with other people in which we're all tenants. So that I think would be how you would, some examples of how you could discover your spiritual talent. You're attracted to it and you miss it when you don't do it. I now find that in the apophatic method of contemplative practice, and I also find that in the cataphatic, going for meandering walks around here well, we live in 3,600 acres of ranch and trees and flowers. Well, not flowers yet, but they'll be coming. Okay, what's next?
Father, I was just wondering.
David, I can barely hear you.
Oh, this is Steve Sparrow. Can you hear me?
Hardly. Something's the matter with my stuff.
Okay, maybe if I talk louder.
Try again.
Can you hear me now? Is it a little bit better? No.
Say it again.
Can you hear me now? Is it a little bit better?
Yeah, I hear you better now. It's this thing. It's not working as well. Okay, go on.
Okay. I was just going to ask, a little bit about Thoreau, but you hear so much about now all living things have consciousness. When you're going for your walks, and yes, you see God's hand in nature, do you ever get a response back from nature, some sort of consciousness response that you can see love or hear love or feel love?
Sure. Especially here in springtime. Well, I'll give you an example because it's trying to be springtime here. Is you see a bush, and on the bush, first of all, you see the bush, You're not just passing a bunch of scenery. You actually notice the bush. You stop and you notice the bush, and on the bush you see buds. And what it spoke to me of, this is supposed to be the Easter season in my religious tradition. Easter season means resurrection and new life. Duh. That's what I see. In the bud, I see God saying, I'm revealing resurrection through this bush. I'm revealing my presence, my new life presence coming to you. I want you to have new life coming out of winter and into spring. Notice my presence as you walk about. I am with you. This is all coming through the bush. I am with you. Oh, by the way, Moses and the burning bush, if you will. So that would be one way that I get an epiphany. Going back to Christmas things and incarnation, I get an epiphany. God is, if you will, incarnational in nature. No more questions. Okay. Well, you can pop them up into, I'm looking at the chat, so I'll see it, but I'm going to just do one or two more things. We're getting close to the 2-hour mark here. And what I want to pick up on is the freedom that I find to be very, very strange. It's a freedom where you don't belong to anybody. And you're accountable to no one. And some people think that's a freedom. And I'll tell you where I think it's the most depressing. It was a bar in Chicago. I told the story someplace called Butch McGuire's. It's still there, by the way, on the near north side, if you know Chicago. But it's much more gussied up now. But then it was a pickup bar way back then in ancient times when I was young. And I would stand in the middle of that bar and I was accountable to no one. And I was nameless. Nobody knew me. Talk about lonely. Wow. So there's a certain loneliness when you're a seeker of community. And I'll tell you, the last place to find that is in a pickup bar. I don't know they have those anymore. But when you're seeking community out there and you're not connected to yourself, that was exactly where I was back then. It's a powerful loneliness. And some people say, I just want to be free of any commitments. I don't want to belong to anybody. I don't want to have a commitment to anybody. And I said, boy, I don't want that. I do not want that. I want to belong. I want to be part of. And I feel I'm a part of the Paulist Fathers and I'm a part of this monastery. It's important to be part of. And tell you the truth, I feel part of SOS in Knoxville. Whether they feel part of me or not, I don't know. But I do feel part of them. So I keep that in mind. And he says that contemplation results in seeing the glory in the ordinary and the commonplace. I think that was part of my answer to that last question. You see, there's a lot of bushes that look very common. They look one just like the other until you get caught by them or by one of them. You get caught by it and you stop. I think that's God catching you. I think that's what Thoreau had. You see the glory in what other people would see as the ordinary. And I think you see that because you have an interior connection that gives you an exterior connection. Two people walk along a beach shore and one's looking for sharks and the other's seeing the face of God. I think you could see the face of God in the shark. I haven't yet, but I suppose you could. So there's a touch of significance in what otherwise would be the ordinary experience. In many ways, the monastic life is just very ordinary, day after day, not a lot of change. But there's a significance in it if you can catch it. And I think you catch it because of your interior life. So you can get to where you can experience God's holiness, if you will, in all things. And however you get to that experience, that's your spiritual talent that helped you to see in the ordinary and the everyday, you're not bored. So many people are bored by COVID. And yet, isn't the tree still outside? COVID didn't attack nature, it attacked people. I think you're definitely connected with all of us. Oh, thank you. Okay. So I think that I might, I'm trying to think if I want to stop with that. I think I'll stop with that. Yeah. And I am going to next month, SOS on the first Saturday. It's going to be the same. It's the same channel. And they're going to be talking about books that they're reading. And I may, if I can show up, then I will talk about my book. In July, I think they take a holiday from one another. And then August, September, October, and November, those first Saturdays, I will be giving talks. And I would say you better be reading Rufus Jones, because I think he's going to be there in August, and we're going to continue on with him and his ideas and make these connections between Thoreau, who influenced Rufus Jones, who influenced Howard Thurman, who influenced, all these connections, these people influencing one another. So keep this all in mind. And thank you. It is being recorded, but it's going to be on the cloud. And if you know how to find it on the cloud, good. What I'm going to try and do is David's going to send this recording to the cloud. And then the techie out here, when he gets back from his Alabama holiday, he's either going to find David Waite and get some ideas, or he's going to find it himself on the cloud. It'll either be identified.
Yeah, Christopher and I will in touch with each other. We'll find a way for him to be able to get the recording and put it up where he usually does.
Okie doke. So it is being recorded, and it will be someplace. Just give us about a week or so. Our guy comes back on Wednesday. Okay, thank you all very much. David, take over.
Okay, before we go, I just want to mention this in the chat room. For those of you who are interested, if you are new to SOS, like to be on the email list, please email Ed Miller at Edgar Miller, one word, EDGAR, MILLER 25, Edgar Miller 25 at gmail.com. That is in the chat. So if you want to look at the chat, you'll be able to see that. And also, if you'd like to help out SOS, he had up how you could help out Terry Ryan for a while. If you want to help out SOS, please send. We can only take checks. We don't have Venmo. So if you could send a check to George Smith at 7443 Somerset Road, George Smith, 7443 Somerset Road, Knoxville, Tennessee 37909. That's also in the chat, and I'll leave things up here for a few minutes longer in case people are writing those things down.
Yeah, there was one question: how to connect to my David Thoreau presentations. All my presentations.
Oh yeah, I see that now. Yes.
Snowmass. You can type it in. Snowmassbookstore.com. You go to snowmassbookstore.com on your search engine, and there'll be a whole list of YouTube sites. You don't have to go on YouTube and search around. You just click that site, and there it is. So David Thoreau Part 1 is is there. And Part 2 is in 2 Saturdays from now, whatever that date is. Oh, I didn't turn my calendar. See, I'm not living in the present moment. This, the 15th. Yeah, the 15th of May is my next presentation at 9 a.m. Mountain Time, David Thoreau Part 2. See, we're going to interconnect all these people. So I'll be back SOS, first Saturday in August. And one of those Saturdays, I think November, I could be in California. And if I am, I'm going to start pretty early. So we'll see where I am then. But 4 Saturdays, Mountain Time, 9 a.m. in California. It'd be pretty early at that time. Okay, I'm done.
Okay, I'm done.
Are we all done?
Yeah, we're all
Bye.
done.
Bye-bye.
I'm gonna
Bye-bye.
stop the recording. I'm gonna stop
Thank
the.
you. Recording's
I'm gonna
over.
stop. I'm gonna stop the recording now.
Okay, that means we can gossip.